The most decimated position group on the entire roster for the University of Georgia is inside linebacker. Will there even be anyone left to play? We'll talk about that coming up on the Locked On Bulldogs podcast.
You are Locked On Bulldogs, your daily podcast on the Georgia Bulldogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Bulldogs podcast. I am Daniel, and with me is not Clint. It is John from over at John Tweet Sports on the Twitter machine. John, longtime friend of the show. We lost your little name thing on the bottom. We had to go with just the generic background here on YouTube because somehow, I don't know, the season ended and things fell apart, and
we won a national championship. All things were destroyed, including
the wheels fell up.
The Chirons,
right. Looting,
the Chirons.
Property was destroyed, not just in Indianapolis, but also here on the Locked On Bulldogs podcast. Glad you're joining us. Thanks for being here. Clint's a little under the weather, so John's stepping in. We got tons to talk about here. Thanks for listening on audio, Apple, Stitcher, Spotify. Follow us on whatever podcast listening app of your choice is, and leave us a rating and review on there. That helps the show out a bunch. Or check us out on YouTube, Locked On Bulldogs podcast, part of Locked On Atlanta, the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks for checking us out over there. Subscribe, thumbs up, leave us a comment, all those things. John, you were there in Indianapolis. Every time I talk to you, I'm just going to bring up Indianapolis because, we were there. You were there. I was there.
I was sitting a few seats down from you, Daniel.
Yeah, we were just embracing and weeping together at the end of the game. It was a fantastic moment. So we saw that team last year, and as I teased in the open, I think a lot of the focus of the attrition from the national championship winning team is on the defensive front. Because you lose the number one pick in the NFL draft, Trayvon Walker. You lose just absolute 4-year anchors for the Georgia Bulldogs like Devontae Wyatt and Jordan Davis, guys that have truly cemented their names as two of the great all-time greats at the defensive line position for Georgia. So that's where a lot of the focus goes. But as we talked about, Clint and I, when we talked about the defensive line, you probably returned the best overall player on Georgia's team to that defensive front in Jalen Carter. And so it's not necessarily that big of a drop-off. Now, when you talk about the inside linebacker position, though, John, you lose everybody. Everyone who did anything last year is
gone.
So let's talk about that last year's group. Obviously anchored by the 3 draft picks, Nakobe Dean, Quay Walker, and Channing Tindall. What did you see out of them? What did they provide for the national championship team? What is Georgia losing in those 3 guys?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's hard to overstate what Georgia is losing in those 3 guys. In particular, Nakobe Dean and Quay Walker. Nakobe Dean played over 500 snaps in 2020. So when you look at, what you're losing from an experience standpoint, coming into last year, you had 2 guys in Nakobe Dean and Quay Walker that had decent playing time. So Quay Walker played almost 350 snaps in 2020. And so if you look at those guys, just the amount of time they had spent on the field, not even counting that they were 3 and 4 years into the program. And you throw Channing Tindall in there, who's just an absolute athlete, but also had 4 years in the program. You are going from some guys who played meaningful experience, meaningful snaps, and guys who had rare athleticism at the inside linebacker position, with Channing Tindall in particular. It's a big hole to fill. There was a lot of experience on that team, and Georgia, that inside linebacker position has been an anchor for that defense the last few years, where you have had guys that have coming into the year have played a significant amount of snaps the previous year. So you're losing experience, you're losing athleticism. With Nakobe Dean, you're losing the quarterback of the defense. You are losing the guy who was getting in the other guys' faces, pointing, calling plays before they were as soon as the first person went in motion, Nakobe Dean knew what the play was going to be. And so it is hard to overstate how much experience you're losing from that group.
Yeah, I think the big thing, and we'll kind of get into this, but you touched on it as we get into the guys that will be playing inside linebacker in the next couple segments. But, you think back to the Kirby Smart era. This is the first time. 2022 will be the first time in the Kirby Smart era that Georgia has not returned an incredibly experienced inside linebacker.
Absolutely.
You go all the way back to Roquan, and then Monty Rice, and then Nakobe Dean. It was just one after the other after the other. And
for some perspective, you're going on until this year. The last 3 years, maybe 4 years, I know guaranteed 3 years, you had an inside linebacker returning to Georgia who had played more than 500 snaps the previous year.
Yeah, it's just you can't quantify that experience. No, Nakobe Dean and Roquan Smith probably in another stratosphere in terms of football player than a Monty Rice is in terms of their athleticism and their overall ability. But you saw that Monty Rice was able to stabilize and anchor the defense in the middle because he had experience, because he knew where to be, because he knew where other guys needed to be, because he knew how to get guys lined up. And he was a sure tackler and knew what SEC football was all about. You got guys coming back we're going to talk about, that are very talented. But there's no hiding in experience, and it's going to show itself this year because Georgia just doesn't have it the way that they have had it. All right, if we're going to grade last year's unit, now we're grading this on a scale of 1 to 99 as if they're a player in Madden. So you can't be 100. Even though I gave last year's defensive line a 100. On a scale of 1 to 99, last year's defensive line is a 100.
I dare someone to give them less than 100.
Someone in the comments section came out and talked about come on. Be serious. What are you putting last year's inside linebacker group at, John?
Yeah, I think for me, that inside linebacker group is pushing 100, but I will stop short of that and say I gave last year's inside linebacker group. I would probably say somewhere around, let's say, a 92, a 93, definitely an A group. Wow. I think for me, as the season went on, that group got significantly better. If you look at, if you're talking about let's talk about the last quarter of the season, that group is 100. And I think, and that's what I love about the maturation of that group. If you're talking about just Nakobe Dean, I think it's 110. But I would say, mid 90s is where I would land for that group. It's hard to poke holes in what that team did. If there was anything, I would say early in the season, they had some challenges when they had some mismatches in coverage. And I think that's SEC football. Like, I think, but by the time you got to the Florida game, that those were no challenges no more.
Listen, that's a tough grade because I want to give them anything less than a 99.
Yeah.
But then I remember the national championship game.
Yes.
And you said the last, half of the season, last quarter of the season. I'll just take you to the last game of the season. That group's 150 in that game. Like on a scale of 1 to 99, that group dominated that national championship game, particularly on the pressure that they were able to put on Bryce Young, some of the chase down plays that they were able to make, some of the sideline to sideline stuff that they were able to do. But you look at all year, the way they were able to mitigate the run, the way that they were able to make tackles. the way that they were able to get pressure on the quarterback. You go all the way back to the first game of the year in Clemson. DJ Uiagalelei, pressure right up the middle from Nakobe Dean the whole game.
Yes.
You just love to see what that group can do. So I go 99. I think it's the second best unit on the team last year. And I don't think there's much wrong that you can find with them as a trio. So we're going to talk about what Georgia returns, which is not a lot of experience, but they do return. They do have a lot of players at inside linebacker. And so we're going to talk about those guys and talk about what grade we might give them coming up. But first, I want to let you know about Built Bar. You know by now it's the tastiest protein bar on planet Earth. It is Clint and I's go-to choice. And right now, the newest flavor, the birthday cake puff. John, it's just marshmallow wrapped in chocolate with sprinkles right inside of it. Tastes like you're eating a birthday cake with chocolate icing on top. Some of the Built Bars have a little bit of a crunch to them. Some of them are a little bit more chewy. These are the marshmallow kind, and so they're just almost melt in your mouth. It's a protein bar. It tastes like a candy bar. What can go? What else more do you need to know about them? They taste delicious. They're high in protein, low in sugar. They're keto approved. They're high in fiber. They're great for whatever diet, meal plan, pre-workout, post-workout, 2 o'clock lull at the office, on the way to drop off the kids at soccer practice. Wherever you need them, Built Bar is there. Go to BuiltBar.com right now. Enter the promo code LOCKEDON15. You get 15% off your first order. So you order those birthday cake puffs. You order 5 other flavors, 1 box, 2 boxes, 10 boxes, whatever you want. 15% off when you enter the promo code LOCKEDON15 at BuiltBar.com, the tastiest protein bar on planet Earth. All right, John. So we talked about last year's inside linebackers. Now let's move on to this coming year. There's not returning experience, as we've said, but there are a lot of guys. And I would say the conversation probably starts with Dumas Johnson, probably is the guy that you got to look at, because he does have the most experience of all of the inside linebackers. What do you like? What do you see out of him?
Well, I mean, I think he's built in the mold of a Roquan Smith, Monty Rice, Nakobe Dean. If you look at him physically, athletically, the way he plays that Butkus award-winning linebacker that Georgia has found a way to create over the last few years. I think he is an absolute beast in stopping the run and filling the gap, playing sound football. I think he also, is very good laterally. And I think for a middle linebacker to be able to be physical downhill, to be able to be fast laterally, to be able to get out in coverage. I mean, he has all that you want. I think, he's a big guy. I think that when I look at JDJ, I think he's built in that mold. You look at him and you see a little bit taller than Nakobe Dean, a little bit, maybe more physical than you've seen some of the linebackers play, which is hard to believe, but he is a thumper. He is a thumper. Dude, he will hit you.
He's got some beef to him. He has got some thickness in his build. And so you look at him and you think there's no way this guy's got the sideline to sideline speed that some of the inside linebackers of Georgia's past have had. But he does have pretty great speed.
Pretty great
to credit his athleticism.
Yeah, and the other thing that I will say about him too is that he had probably, at least from the reports that you read around spring practice, what you saw at G-Day, what you saw at some of the scrimmages, he had probably the best spring maybe of any player at any position in terms of him stepping into the role and looking like, acting like, feeling like that starter at Georgia at the position. He certainly was the guy of all the new guys, the non-returning starters. He was the guy that had the best spring.
Yeah, and you get the feeling this is a guy that he knows it's his time. He knows that this is his team and this is his time, and he is seemingly seizing that moment. And that experience does help. And he's been in the system. He's been around Kirby and Coach Shu and all the guys, that are running the defense. And so he knows the ins and outs of the position. So we expect him to be out there a lot against Oregon. We don't need to get into starters or whatever, but we expect to see a lot of him against Oregon. Yeah. If you had to go with the second most likely guy that we're going to see against Oregon, and we'll get to maybe in the third segment, we'll get to a lot of other guys because there's going to be a lot of guys, I think, that play. So we'll have time to get to all the other guys. Yeah. But if you want to go with a number 2 guy, who are you going with?
Yeah, for me, I think as things stand today in May, I think you have to go with Tresman Marshall, assuming that he's healthy. He's a guy, he's class of 2019. He's a guy that's been in the system for 3 years. He hasn't played many snaps every year, but he has been on the field, here and there every year that he's been at Georgia. I think he's another guy he's 6'1", he's 235. He can move laterally. He can hit you. But I think from just a schematic standpoint, I think from what I know about how Kirby runs the defense, he's an athletically gifted guy. He's been in the system long enough. He feels to me a little bit like a Channing Tindall, where he's been here for a while, and now he's in a situation where you kind of get forced into playing. And I think he's going to be the one that will get the first call to be the Quay Walker to the Nakobe Dean of the JDJ +1 club at middle linebacker.
He's my pick too. I honestly think if I had to choose one guy that is going to be the most likely to quote unquote explode onto the scene at Georgia, it's going to be Tresman Marshall. I think he's going to be that household name for Georgia fans by the middle of the season. That right now, if you polled the 93,000 people that are going to be at the home opener and ask them to tell you something about Tresman Marshall, I'm not sure half of them would know anything about Tresman Marshall. Let's call it what it is. Let's call it what it is. But I think by the middle of the season, that's going to be a totally different thing. I think you're going to say this is going to be a guy whose name is going to be on the mouths of all Georgia fans. So I like this kid.
Yeah, he was a top 10. I think he was 7 or 8 in the nation inside linebackers coming out of high school at that position. He was a top 10 recruit, class of 2019 from Clinch County, homegrown guy. And I think you're right. I think people don't know who Tresman Marshall is. I think that'll change very quickly as you get a few games into the season.
All right, so we're going to talk about a bunch of other guys in the last segment. But before we get there, let's project out a grade, because we're going to talk about what do we expect in terms of production, what do we expect in terms of rotation, who might contribute, who's an under the radar guy, all that stuff in the third segment. But let's just skip to the end and say, what's the grade? If last year's group you gave them a 92, which my goodness gracious, I can't even take your class.
I'm a hard. Listen, I'm a hard. Listen, I'm a hard. I don't grade on a. I don't grade with my heart.
With kindness. I gave him a 99. So, but where do we project this year's inside linebackers? I think it'll be a step down, but how much of a step down is the question? Is this going to be a solid unit? Is this going to be a liability on the team? Where are you putting them 1 to 99?
Yeah, I think Glenn Schumann and Kirby Smart has proven that linebacker at Georgia will not be a liability. And so until I am shown otherwise, I am going to tell you that linebacker is not going to be a liability at the University of Georgia. It is absolutely going to be a strength. So if I'm projecting, and we'll go with your 99 instead of my 92. We'll grade on the on
the Monroe curve.
On the Monroe curve. I think from a 99 last year, I think this team will be in the, if I'm predicting they'll be in the low to mid 90s. I think by the end of the season, this is going to be an A+ kind of linebacking core at Georgia. Because I I can't look at the results that Georgia has had as a unit and look at the guys, the athleticism they have, look at the complementary styles that they've recruited at the position, and actually say they're going to be less than than an A squad.
Yeah.
And so do I think they will be as good as this year's squad? No, but I don't. But also I don't know that. I'll say this, I don't know that they have to be. And we can talk about that as we talk about the players they're going to play. But I don't think they have to be that all-world linebacking group. I think they have to play solid football, fundamental football, move laterally, get the team in position, because I think the defensive line is going to be good enough that those gaps are going to be open. Jalen Carter is going to take up enough space that JDJ, that Tresman Marshall, that some of these other guys are just going to have to run and make plays, and I think they're going to be able to do that.
Yeah, that's right. I agree with you. I'm going to put them at a 91, and I'm basing that on two things. I'm basing it on talent, because there's some talented guys. Now, you talked about Tresman Marshall, where he has been ranked, coming out of high school. We talked about JJ, but some of these guys we're going to talk about in the next segment, you really start to get into Georgia's got some elite talent at linebacker, and that's not unique to linebacker. That is across every position, on the roster. Yes. Yep. But there's some elite talent there. But then the second factor that you base that grade on, because you obviously haven't seen it on the field, but you got talent, and then you got coaching. You said it. You have elite coaching, and that you have seen on the field. You have seen it. It is as proven as anything in college football.
Yeah.
Listen, anything in college football, is it proven that Lincoln Riley can coach quarterbacks? Well, it was until last year. I'm not so sure that we can really say that. But Kirby Smart ain't never trotted out some average linebacking group out there.
A Lincoln Riley quarterback ended up at South Carolina. Okay, so let's just talk about
the savior of the program. That's the savior of the program.
South Carolina,
the place where he has to beat out a 32-year-old grad student to win the job. That's
Georgia has never had a linebacker that was a 5-star quality linebacker ending up at some place like South Carolina.
It's tough. It's tough. So talent and coaching, I give them a 91. All right, so let's talk about expectations. What do we expect from the team? John and I will be right back to tell you all about that in just a second. All right, John. So what do we expect from this year's unit? We talked about the guys that we say, presumed starters, whatever. I don't know. I don't want to quibble over that. But the guys that we expect to be getting a lot of snaps. All right. Marshall and Dumas Johnson. So what do we think about the rest of this field now? Who are the names Georgia fans need to be keeping an eye on? And what do we really expect out of those names?
Well, I'll give you one. I would love to hear your thoughts on this too.
Yeah.
There are a lot of them, right? I think for me, I am interested to see. Ryan Davis is a guy who is an incredibly talented guy that was hurt last year. He actually, injuries. He's just been plagued by that. If he can stay healthy, I think that's a guy that can absolutely contribute in a meaningful way to this team. He's a guy that was just kind of, really, really highly evaluated coming out of high school. But he was one that I want to mention. We can talk about, these guys. I think Xavier Sori is another one. Like Xavier Sori is a guy that can play inside or outside. He's a guy that is an absolute, some rankings, depending on the recruiting sites you look at, had him as the number 1 to the number 2 linebacker in the nation in the class of 2021. I think this is a kid that from all that I have heard is not only physically gifted, talented linebacker, but he is also has leadership skills. He's a guy that can actually, can jump in and make an impact early on. Those are two, assuming if Ryan Davis can get recuperated and get healthy, I think those are two guys that I'm really excited to see complement this squad.
I think they're always going to be grouped together because they came in the same class. They were, according to some places, the number 1, number 2 linebackers in the class of 2021. I'm curious as to, between Smile London and Xavier Sori, who makes more tackles next year for the University of Georgia? I'll just pose that question to you because I think both of those guys are immensely talented. And Monda got the playing time last year. He got a much bigger lion's share of the playing time, not just on special teams, but in terms of actual gameplay.
Oh yeah.
Xavier Sori got some action, but he got little enough action that he was able to take the red shirt. So fewer than 4 games. And so does that translate into this coming season, or do we see Sori maybe take a little bit of a jump? But I think you see both those guys contribute. I'd be curious as to see which one contributes more.
Yeah, I think Small Mondon is probably going to contribute more. If you look at last year, I mean, he played in 11 games. He played, I think he was one of the guys that played over 100 snaps. Like, he was right there with Jamon Dumas Johnson. Had a lot of playing time as a true freshman, and so I think yes, I think if you're talking about who's going to contribute, I guess for me the question is who's going to contribute and who are you excited to see what happens?
Yeah.
For me, like Ryan Davis and Xavier Sori are the two that I'm excited to see. Can these guys, where do these guys end up this year? What do they look like? If you're looking at, for contributions, guys that are going to be in that group that are going to be graded, I think Small Mondon is the, I hate to, I'm not comparing these two as a player, but Small Mondon feels like the Channing Tindall of this year's team. The guy that is going to come in, that's going to play, a lot of snaps, is going to play in particular down and distance, that's going to be, a linebacker that will push for maybe more playing time than that, but is going to be a regular in the rotation when we're mixing up fronts and trying to do different things for the offense.
Yeah, another guy I'll throw out there, you talk about regular in the rotation, and we talked about him when we talked about edge players, because I think you're going to see him play a lot of different positions. But Chaz Chambliss is going to play a lot of football for the University of Georgia this year. He's going to play a lot of football.
He is. He is.
He reeks of a guy that just you can't keep him off the field.
Nope.
I think that's who, because of his physicality, because of his toughness, because of the I don't want to maybe use the word reckless abandon that he plays with, but this is a guy that his hair's on fire each and every play that he's out there. And that Kirby loves for people to be in the right spot and to know what they're doing.
Yes.
But he also loves that attitude and effort that I think Chaz brings.
Well, I think this isn't a quarterback show. But I will say
let's
this.
talk about the quarterbacks. Yeah, people in the comments.
Come on. I think what Kirby Smart loves about a guy like Stetson Bennett is what you get with Chaz Chambliss on the other side, in terms of a guy that has a little bit of that no fear, that kind of with Stetson Bennett, I think it's the gunslinger mentality. I think with Chaz Chambliss, it's that, you said it, the reckless abandon. I think you see players get out on the field that have to know what they're doing, that have to be able to make plays, that have to understand scheme and all of those things. But sometimes, and I'm not saying this is what happened with Stetson Bennett, but sometimes you have players that have the slight edge compared to somebody that may be a little more talented than them because of their mentality. And Kirby has proven that he will put guys out there, especially on the defensive side of the ball, that do, that play with their hair on fire for sure.
Yeah. One last thing before we jump out of here. Who is the freshman most likely to contribute at inside linebacker, and why is it C.J. Washington?
Ooh, C.J. Washington is my guy, man. C.J. Washington. Somebody described C.J. Washington as being what Nick Chubb would have been if Nick Chubb played linebacker. And I think he went to Cedartown High School, so that correlation.
It
But
helps. It helps.
but that opened my mind to a new way of looking at CJ Washington.
Yeah, I mean, you line him up in the backfield. I'd feel great about it. I'm just telling you right now, put CJ Washington in the backfield behind Stetson Bennett. I feel great. I'm happy.
Absolutely. I mean, that guy is he's fast, he's physical. He can play inside, outside. It's funny because you mentioned like line him up in the backfield. I think in high school, I think he averaged like 9 yards a carry. Like he was
an
back there running
freak.
back like all over.
He was a freak, yeah.
So he is if people are trying to picture CJ Washington, he's a guy. If Nick Chubb were a linebacker, playing linebacker, that's what CJ Washington is, which I'm excited
about. It's not a terrible picture to go for. I don't know that we'll see anything out of any of the true freshmen because you're just not going to rotate 6-7 guys. You're just not at this position. And we've already named quite a few. Yeah.
Especially when you're looking at the guys that are starting are guys who have been in the program for 2 or 3 years, but they're not incredibly experienced, which means that next level down is no experience. And not only no experience, but also new in the program. And we all know, Kirby can develop true freshmen much better than some other programs, and can develop, that two level down better than other programs, especially when it matters. But he does have the tendency on defense to stick with the experienced guys at linebacker and not be throwing in, true freshmen in those moments. So
I wonder if that's why his defenses are always very good. That seems like maybe those two things could be related. I was unaware that Kirby did any development. I was pretty sure that he was a recruit-only type of guy, not an elite coach. Can't really do it. I mean, he's not elite like some of the other coaches that have been ranked ahead of him in some of these things that have come out.
The challenge was Kirby was very good at bags under the table. And now that NIL is here, it's like the recruiting's going to slow down, the development's going to slow down. It's just it's a good thing.
We've seen it slow down. We have really seen it, and so pray for us because we are struggling over here in Athens. The University of Georgia is on a spiral down the toilet. Meanwhile, Billy Napier really running a ship at Florida. He's got things headed in the right direction. He's going to parlay that one Sun Belt title into an SEC East third place finish this year, and that's going to be a step in the right.
For the Florida fans who are listening in the 32nd minute of the podcast, because I know you're here, Billy Napier, he hasn't even coached a single game, and his beat writers are already talking about how disappointing the 2023 class is so far. So that's how things are going in Gainesville.
He took a page out of that Dan Mullen recruiting book, and so it's not time to recruit right now. It's spring practice. We're working on things. All right, John, appreciate you jumping on. Enjoyed it as always. Go follow John at John Tweet Sports over on Twitter. If you don't already, you probably do. We'll have him back on the show sometime soon. John, great to talk to you as always. We'll see you guys later.
See ya.